Hawaii is a tropical paradise, a land blessed with spectacular beauty and the spirit of aloha. Dana Ireland was smart, fit, and full of life. She loved the big island of Hawaii. On Christmas Eve, 1991, Dana's life was stolen. She was deliberately run over while riding her bicycle, sexually assaulted, dumped into the bushes, and left to die. A local man confessed to the murder and said 2 brothers helped him. The man recanted his confession, but no one believed him.
It's like the story of the boy who cried wolf. Once you start to tell the truth, nobody gonna listen.
Crime scene DNA did not match any of the 3 men, but all 3 were convicted anyway. It raises questions. Are the 3 convicted men innocent scapegoats? Why aren't the police pursuing the man who left his male DNA on Dana Ireland? Why was exonerating new DNA evidence locked up by court order and not given to the convicted men? Remember the movie Silence of the Lambs, when the great actor Anthony Hopkins says about the killer, he covets. In episode 11, we'll see how FBI profiling gives us insight into who killed Dana Ireland. We'll see that the killer knew her, she knew him, and he was probably watching her, coveting her. If you are watching this episode 11 before you have watched the other 10 episodes, then it may be because Judges for Justice released this episode early. Why would we do that? It is because we believe it is imperative that Big Island law enforcement launch a new pursuit of Dana Ireland's killer as soon as possible. We believe that public consideration of this episode will encourage law enforcement to reopen their investigation and find the man who left his male DNA, bite mark, and t-shirt at the crime. In the first 10 episodes, we have demonstrated why we believe Frank Pauline, Albert Ian Schweitzer, and Sean Schweitzer had nothing to do with the murder of Dana Ireland. So, who murdered Dana Ireland? In this episode 11, Judges for Justice presents who we think killed Dana Ireland. Not his name, but what he looked like, the type of vehicle he drove, where he lived, that he knew Dana Ireland and she knew him. This is important information that can be used to find the killer today, nearly 30 years after this horrific crime. On the day of the murder, Dana Ireland was temporarily staying with her parents at their vacation rental in the Kapoho Vacationland subdivision. Prior to that, Dana lived 1 mile north of Crime Scene 1 on Ililani Road with her sister, Sandy Ireland, and Sandy's boyfriend, Jim Ingham, at 144784 Ililani Road. Both Sandy Ireland and Jim Ingham are still alive and living in Hawaii. By the end of this episode, you reasonably may ask why the police aren't asking Sandy Ireland and Jim Ingham and their neighbors at least 4 important questions. The first question to Jim and Sandy and their neighbors: which of your neighbors did you consider to be your friends? The second question: did any of your neighbors drive a dark aqua greenish 1970s Datsun pickup truck? The third question: did any of your neighbors have a young boy approximately 10 years of age living with them? And the fourth question: was there a heavy-set man in his early 20s, about 5 foot 10 inches tall, dark complexion, with distinctive dark circles under his eyes, living in the neighborhood? The good news: we have the killer's DNA profile. Seemingly on a weekly basis, cold cases are solved. By looking at the evidence and getting insight from the experts, suspects can be generated. Their DNA can be obtained and compared with the killer's profile. The 1991 MGM movie, The Silence of the Lambs, is the fictional story of a police manhunt for a serial killer nicknamed Buffalo Bill. It's a great movie. We highly recommend it. It's fictional, but certain aspects of the movie are based upon the study of crime. The FBI studies sexual homicides to determine the common patterns, characteristics, and motives of these killers. We are going to show you brief segments from the movie to demonstrate how knowing the characteristics of these killers can be used to solve a crime. The actor Jodie Foster plays Clarice Starling, an FBI special agent in training who wants to become an FBI profiler. The actor Anthony Hopkins plays serial killer Dr. Hannibal Lecter. Incarcerated Dr. Lecter asks Starling, "What is Buffalo Bill's true nature? What does he do?" Agent Starling answers, "He kills women." Lecter tells her, "No, he covets. That's his nature." Then Lecter asks her an important question. "How do we begin to covet, Clarice?"
What is its nature? What does he do, this man you seek?
He kills women.
No, he covets. That is his nature. And how do we begin to covet, Clarice?
He then tells Clarice Starling that people begin by coveting what they see every day.
Now, we begin by coveting what we see every day.
After her meeting with Lecter, Clarice Starling is going over the case with another FBI agent. She has a revelation. Buffalo Bill knew his victim.
What did Lecter say about the first principles?
Simplicity.
What does this guy do? He covets. How do we first start to covet?
We covet what we see.
Every day.
Hot damn, Clarice.
You knew her.
This fact that the killer knew her, she was not a random victim, leads Agent Starling to do a background check on the first victim. The movie is fictitious, but this part of the movie is based upon actual FBI studies. The FBI has the experts on sexual homicide killers. When looking at the murder of Dana Ireland, one of the first questions is, who could have committed such a deviant crime? The killer attempts to murder her, then sexually assaults her while she lies dying. His deviancy creeps us out. Many crimes we can understand, but not this one. Unfortunately, this crime is not unique. This type of crime and this type of killer are well known to the Federal Bureau of Investigation. Since the 1970s, the Behavioral Science Unit of the FBI, often called profilers, have investigated, consulted on, or studied thousands of sexual homicides. They have interviewed many of these killers in prison. They have found common motives, patterns, and characteristics of these killers. First, Judges for Justice believes that the killer knew Dana Ireland, or more accurately, knew who she was. She knew him, at least by sight. He had been watching her. He may have been a voyeur, a peeping Tom. Second, the killer lived close to Dana Ireland while she was staying with her sister Sandy Ireland and Sandy's boyfriend, Jim Ingham. We came to these conclusions by making deductions from the evidence and listening to the experts, the FBI. The deductions from the evidence comport with the FBI profile. Before we look at what we can learn from FBI profiling, let's look at what the evidence tells us. This is a view of the Crime Scene 1 intersection in January 2018. We are looking west up Kapoho Kai Drive with Ililani Road coming in from the north on our right. The silver Ford SUV's taillight is the approximate location where Dana Ireland was struck. In 1991, both streets were cinder roads. Tire tracks from the vehicle that hit Dana Ireland were clearly visible in the road. Anna Sherrill was the first person on the crime scene and the first person to call emergency services on December 24, 1991. In January 2018, Anna filled out a diagram for us to help explain what she saw at Crime Scene 1. She saw tire tracks, roughly 10 inches wide, and acceleration marks where the tires had spun. It looked to her as if a vehicle had started on the other side of the road, then accelerated with the tires spinning and struck the bicycle. Anna drew the general location of the tire tracks and acceleration marks. The motor vehicle assault was described using graphics in a 2011 video, Island of Lies. The narrator is explaining what the tire track evidence indicated to Detective Guillermo.
Detective Guillermo tries to piece together what happened. He notices the vehicle's tire marks come from the wrong side of the road, then sharply swerve.
Rod Thompson was a reporter for the Honolulu Star-Bulletin newspaper. He covered the Dana Ireland case. In a 2011 interview, he is explaining what the tire tracks indicated.
The only likely thing that a swerve would mean is that someone deliberately swerved. It gave a high degree of suspicion that it was a deliberate intent to hit the bicyclist.
We agree that the tire tracks showed that the vehicle deliberately intended to hit Dana Ireland, but we disagree that the vehicle was moving, then sharply swerved to hit the bicycle rider. To make the acceleration marks described by the police and Anna Sherrill, experts say the vehicle had to be stopped before accelerating. If the vehicle was stopped, it indicates the driver thought about what he was about to do before he drove into Dana Ireland. Dr. Jeff Ball is a professional engineer. He is the principal engineer in Veritech Consulting Engineering, LLC, located in Castle Rock, Colorado. Dr. Ball specializes in mechanical engineering design and motor vehicle accident reconstruction. Using the available evidence, Dr. Ball and Veritech Engineering made a reconstruction video of the vehicle assault. About 5 p.m. on Christmas Eve, a pickup truck approached Dana Ireland from behind. The vehicle moved into the left oncoming lane as if to give the cyclist plenty of room. The pickup truck drove past Dana and then stopped in the left oncoming lane. After Dana rode her bicycle by the stopped vehicle, the driver suddenly accelerated, his tires spinning on the cinder road. He drove into the bicycle. Officer Wagner of the Hawaii Police Department was one of the first officers at Crime Scene 1. He spoke to Eric Carlsmith. Quote, Eric related that about 1700 hours on this day, he was in front of his residence on Ililani Road. He noticed a pickup truck parked at the intersection of Ililani Road and Kapoho Kai Drive facing the southwest direction. End quote. Eric Carlsmith and his girlfriend Karina were stopped in front of their driveway on Ililani Road, looking south at a pickup truck down at the intersection with Kapoho Kai Drive. Eric and Karina's location on this Veritech Engineering video is marked as Location of Witness 1. Detective Kuali'i was one of the detectives assigned to help lead Detective Guillermo. On page 8 of his report, Kuali'i notes that Eric Carlsmith and his girlfriend Karina stopped at their driveway on Ililani Road and were looking at a pickup truck at the intersection of Ililani Road and Kapoho Kai Drive. Eric told the detective that he saw the left leg of a human being carried and put into the bed of the truck. Eric was adamant that he saw a human being placed into the truck. On page 9 of the detective's report, quote, Carl Smith indicated that he is certain that what he had observed was the bare leg, foot, of a human being from the knee to the toe, and that it was white-skinned, end quote. Dana Ireland was wearing shorts, tennis shoes with no socks. Her left shoe, still tied, was on the road at crime scene 1. Let's think about this for a moment. Eric saw a white-skinned left leg from knee to toe. There's no doubt in our opinion that Eric Carl Smith and his girlfriend Karina saw Dana Ireland being put into the bed of a pickup truck. Carl Smith further reported that a shirtless man appeared by the truck and stared at him and Karina for about a minute. We believe the man was shirtless because he had wrapped his blue Jimmy Z t-shirt around Dana Ireland's head injuries. We believe the man was staring at Eric and Karina for 2 reasons. First, he was wondering what they had seen. Did they see him do his U-turn? Did they see him put Dana Ireland into the bed of his truck? Second, he wanted to go north on Ililani Road, but he did not want anyone to see him. He was waiting for them to drive into their driveway. He wanted to go north on Ililani because that is where he lived. Carl Smith reported that the shirtless man then retrieved grass or shrubbery from the side of the roadway and deposited them into the bed of the truck. We believe the driver did this to justify his location, to establish, in his mind, a legitimate reason for being on the road. Eric also reported seeing a young boy between the ages of 9 and 11 walk towards the back of the truck. Then the boy entered the truck from the passenger's side. The man entered the truck and drove off Mauka towards the mountain westbound. At noon on December 25, 1991, Detective Cooley interviewed a second person who saw the shirtless man, a young boy, and pickup truck at the intersection of Kapoho Kai Drive and Ililani Road. His name was Lee Schaller, a 50-year-old man who lived in the Kapoho Vacationland subdivision. At about the time of the crime, Lee Schaller was driving westbound on Kapoho Kai Drive. At the intersection of Ililani Road, Schaller observed a shirtless man whom he described as a local male, a bike on the south side of the road, and an old model pickup truck, rust or gray in color. Schaller also observed a 10 to 12-year-old young boy with a dark complexion walking toward the truck from where the bike was located. Lee Schaller also observed tire imprints in the road leading to the bicycle and a white-colored athletic shoe in the vicinity. The importance of Lee Schaller is he corroborates much of what Eric and Karina reported. An older pickup truck in the same location, a local male without a shirt, and a 10 to 12-year-old young boy. The third person to see the pickup truck, shirtless man, and the young boy at crime scene 1 was Eric Carl Smith's girlfriend, 18-year-old Karina K. We are not revealing her full last name at her request. Karina reported to Detective Coloma that she, quote, observed a Datsun pickup truck, like a lowrider, with black Bondo and primer with turquoise patches, situated within the Ililani Street and Kapoho Kai intersection." End quote. Karina described a male driver who was on the other side of the pickup truck standing by the bed as having a dark complexion, approximately 5 feet 10 inches to 5 feet 11 inches tall, 180 pounds, black, short hair, no facial hair. Detective Coloma also noted that Karina described a young male, approximately 10 or 11 years old. The boy went into the pickup truck through the passenger door. On December 19, 2017, I interviewed Karina Kay in Honolulu. She asked that we blur her face. She is concerned for her safety. Karina grew up in the Puna district on the Big Island and is native Hawaiian. I asked her to give her name and where she lived. Let's start by saying your name and your address, please.
My name is Karina. I live in Honolulu, Hawaii.
Karina related that about 5 p.m. on December 24, 1991, she and her boyfriend, Eric Carl Smith, as they approached their driveway on Ililani Road, observed a 1970s Datsun pickup truck parked at the intersection with Kapoho Kai Drive. You've made an arrow at the proximate location of your driveway, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so as you approached that driveway, what happened?
We noticed a truck parked down the road.
Karina stated they watched the pickup truck for 5 to 10 minutes. At one point, they saw a man with brown skin put a child, into the bed of the truck. And what did you see?
I saw a guy, looked like a brown guy, on the driver's side behind by the truck. Pick up, like, it looked like a kid. And he put it behind the truck in the bed.
Did you see anybody else there?
There was a little kid.
And what did he look like?
He looked like a little brown kid. And he ran around the truck from the driver's side to the passenger side, in the front side.
He ran around behind the truck or the front of the truck?
The front of the truck.
And got in the passenger side?
Yes.
A woman named Ida Smith, age 56, found Dana Ireland at crime scene 2. According to the police reports, Ida had returned home in Wawa about 5:30 p.m. and started making dinner. Ida heard Dana Ireland's cries for help and found her about 100 yards from Ida's house. Officer Harold Pinow was one of the first officers to crime scene 2, and he interviewed Ida Smith. During the trial of Frank Pauline, Officer Pinow testified that Ida Smith had told him on the evening of the crime that Dana said her attacker was either a friend or a friend of a friend. This indicates Dana knew her attacker by sight, but not his name. Since its founding in 1908, the Federal Bureau of Investigation has evolved into one of the most respected and sophisticated law enforcement agencies in the world. In 1972, the FBI formed the Behavioral Science Unit. These agents started studying certain types of crimes, including sexual homicides, on an informal basis. They started seeing common patterns. These patterns and characteristics proved useful in identifying offenders. The book, Sexual Homicide, Patterns and Motives, by Ressler, Burgess, and Douglas, is described in an FBI law enforcement bulletin. Sexual homicide offers an enlightening and practical, yet academically sound view from the law enforcement investigator's viewpoint, a powerful tool for identifying and apprehending sexual killers. The FBI classifies sexual homicides on a continuum. On one end is the organized sexual homicide. On the other end is the disorganized sexual homicide. The serial killer is an organized sexual killer. He has a plan and leaves little evidence. On the other end is the disorganized killer. His crime is spontaneous. He has no plan to avoid detection. He usually leaves evidence. Here's a chart taken from the book. We compiled this chart from tables 8.1 and 8.2 on pages 122 and 123 of the book, Sexual Homicide, Patterns and Motives. The organized killer knows he has a compulsion to kill women and has a plan to avoid capture. This is the serial killer. On the other end of the spectrum is the disorganized killer. He knows his victim. His crime is spontaneous, not planned. He is suddenly presented with an opportunity. He leaves evidence. Dana Ireland's murder exhibits the characteristics of a disorganized killer. On page 131 of the book, Sexual Homicide, Patterns and Motives, the attack of the disorganized killer is described. Quote, "The offender kills instantly to have control. He cannot take the risk that the victim will get the upper hand. The offender uses a blitz style of attack for encountering the victim. He either approaches the victim from behind, suddenly overpowering her, or kills suddenly, as with a gun. The attack is a violent surprise, occurring out of the blue and in a location where the victim is going about his or her usual activities. The victim is caught completely off guard." End quote. The description of the disorganized killer's attack fits the Dana Ireland assault to a T. A surprise blitz attack from behind while Dana was going about her normal daily activity. Greg McCrary is a retired FBI supervisory special agent. Mr. McCrary has been investigating violent crime, including sexual homicides, for over 45 years. I interviewed him in June 2019 at his home in Virginia. I asked him what police agencies he had worked with.
I've consulted with law enforcement agencies throughout the United States, Canada, Europe, France, Germany, England, Spain. I worked with Scotland Yard, the French National Police, Hungarian National Police, Budapest Homicide. I've taught at the National Police Academy of Spain and Portugal, in Stockholm, Sweden. I've been to Asia, in Japan, and worked cases over there.
I asked Greg McCrary to give us an assessment of whether Dana's killer was an organized or disorganized offender.
The offender in the Dana Ireland case is certainly more of a disorganized offender than organized. When we think about the method and manner of approaching the victim, disorganized offenders use a blitz attack typically. That is the immediate application of injurious physical force. This is what happened here. Hit her on her bike. Then once she was disabled, picked her up, put her in the truck, drove her to a remote area where then he sexually assaulted her, and eventually she died as a result of those injuries. So this is sort of a classic disorganized type of offender.
I asked former FBI profiler McCrary to give us an overview of the disorganized killer.
The disorganized offender is an individual typically with poor interpersonal skills or not highly developed interpersonal skills. Little societal aversion. They don't fit in typically really, really well. I mean, they can within a certain subgroup of the population, but they're not high-functioning individuals. They're criminally unsophisticated individuals, and the crime scene reflects that. They're not evidence conscious. There tends to be evidence at the crime scene. They don't take time to clean up or take precautions to keep from leaving evidence and so forth. Typically, they live at, near, or around the crime scene. They work in their comfort zone in an area they're typically familiar with. And their relationship with the victim is typically sort of tangential. They may be acquainted with the victim, but kind of superficially, or maybe a little more, but they may know the victim. The victim may or may not know them. It can be kind of a loose relationship, but they have some relationship because the victim then has entered their comfort zone.
The 2013 third edition of the Crime Classification Manual is considered an authoritative text for those who investigate violent crime. On page 214, the authors note that the disorganized sexual homicide offender will be considered odd by those who know him. He is usually sloppy and disheveled, with nocturnal habits such as walking aimlessly around his neighborhood. On October 15, 1991, Dana Ireland moved to the Big Island to live with her sister and Jim Ingham. About December 8th, Jim and Sandy flew to Colorado to go skiing. They left Dana alone in their house on Ililani Road. On December 10, 1991, their parents, John and Louise Ireland, flew to the Big Island to spend the holidays with their two daughters. The parents rented the bottom of a duplex in the Kapoho Vacationland subdivision, and Dana moved in with them. Why would a person, the killer, be driving eastbound on Kapoho Kai Drive about 5 p.m. on Christmas Eve? We believe the killer is driving eastbound on Kapoho Kai Drive because he is heading to where he lived, or possibly where his young boy passenger, or both, lived. It is Christmas Eve, close to dinner time. We believe the killer was planning to make a left on Ililani Road, but when he saw Dana Ireland on her bike, everything changed. FBI profilers teach that a common characteristic of the disorganized killer is that he lives or works near the crime scene. There's no work in this area, but even if there was, 5 p.m. on Christmas Eve would not be a time to report to work. Nor would the killer be going to work with a young boy. So we think the crime scene is close to his home, not his work. The FBI says the disorganized killer's attack is spontaneous. This appears to be correct. The killer couldn't have planned on seeing Dana Ireland riding her bike alone. But even if he could, he wouldn't have planned on having a passenger with him. This is a spur-of-the-moment attempt to kill. It was not planned. Here's how former FBI profiler Greg McCrary explained the relationship between the disorganized killer and his victim, the driver, and Dana Ireland.
I think it's highly probable that this offender was acquainted with her in some way, may have met her through a friend or happenstance, or been in the neighborhood, or done something that just came across her in some way. Probably not very closely related to her, because I think she would have been able to identify him. She did live, is my understanding, and made some comments about the offender, but I think if she knew him by name, she would have said so. So this would be someone that she may have known, or certainly he was acquainted with her, but it would be a step or two removed from a very, very close relationship.
This probable fact that the killer knew his victim, that the killer knew Dana Ireland, greatly reduces the suspect pool. Add to it that he likely lived close to Jim Ingham and Sandy Ireland, further reduces our suspect pool. Vacationland resident Anna Sherrill was the first person at Crime Scene 1 and called emergency services. The next day, on December 25th, Anna Sherrill was told that the girl who had been attacked on Kapoho Drive had died. She decided to visit the Wawa Fishing Trail, Crime Scene 2, and pay her respects. Something significant happened. While at the fishing trail, a man appeared out of the bushes. He had a 10-speed bike with narrow tires. He had a dark complexion, was heavy set, and about 5 feet 10 inches tall. He was out of place, and his bicycle was inappropriate for the muddy, deeply rutted beach road. Anna Sherrill informed us that he had a very distinctive feature: dark circles under his eyes. Greg McCrary states that disorganized sexual killers sometimes do return to the crime scene. If that was the killer that Anna Sherrill saw, maybe he had ditched his truck and the only transportation he could find was a 10-speed bike. Maybe he was looking to see if Dana's body had been found. Or he was there to pick up his blue Jimmy Z t-shirt. If this was the killer, it is likely that he continues to have, 29 years later, those dark circles under his eyes. Combining the evidence and FBI profiling, here is what we think happened. At the time of the murder, Dana Ireland had been living with her parents in their Kapoho Vacation Lab subdivision rental for 2 weeks, from December 10th to December 24th, 1991. We believe that if the killer was aware that Dana Ireland was living with her parents, then he would not have attacked her in broad daylight on Christmas Eve, 1991. We believe the killer was driving on Kapoho Drive to make a left turn on Ililani Road and return to where he lived. We believe the killer lived near Jim Ingham and Sandy Ireland. Dana Ireland had lived with Jim and Sandy from October 15th to December 10th, 1991. We believe the killer lived close to Jim and Sandy, probably in the house of neighbor A, neighbor B, neighbor C, or neighbor D. Or maybe his 10-year-old boy passenger lived in one of those houses and the killer hung out there. Karina thought the driver of the pickup was about 22 years of age, so it is unlikely he's the father of the boy. Maybe an uncle. Maybe the boy's parents both worked and they had him watch the boy. From FBI profiling, we know the offender may be considered odd by those who know him. He may exhibit nocturnal habits, such as walking aimlessly around his neighborhood. Jim and Sandy's house was on a 5-acre tract with small trees, bushes, and undergrowth surrounding it. Dana Ireland's killer may have been watching her while she lived with Jim and Sandy. Think of Dr. Hannibal Lecter. He covets. And what do we covet? We covet what we see every day. According to the book Murder in Paradise, Dana Ireland picked up her parents, John and Louise Ireland, at the Hilo Airport on December 10th, 1991. Dana's mother, Louise, was uneasy that Dana had been left alone. On December 10th, the same day the parents arrived, Dana moved out of Jim and Sandy's house and in with her parents. She stayed with her parents even after Jim and Sandy returned from skiing. In our interview with retired supervisory special agent and former FBI profiler Greg McCrary, he noted how the fantasy may start out sexual, but it progresses to anger, even hatred and revenge. By hating his victim, he can internally justify murdering his victim.
The fantasy they have in the sexual homicides is certainly there's a sexual component to that, but there also can be a sense of anger or that this victim may represent the type of victim they could never obtain any other way through socially appropriate approaches. Maybe they see it as above them kind of sociologically, and they may resent that and develop some hatred for that. And that victim may represent other people that have treated this person badly, and now they're taking out the revenge against this particular victim.
The disorganized killer attacks when the victim is alone. He wants no witnesses and no one to thwart his blitz attack. On December 8th or so, Jim and Sandy left to go skiing in Colorado. Dana was now alone in their house on Ililani Road. The offender is watching that night and sees only Dana Ireland at the Ingham house. He sees the same thing on the night of December 9th. No witnesses, no one to spoil his attack. His obsessive thoughts are moving from lust to anger, to hatred and revenge. He gives in to his violent obsession and decides that if she is alone on the night of December 10th, he will attack Dana Ireland. But that night, Jim and Sandy's house is dark. No one is there because Dana Ireland has moved in with her parents. The voyeur is frustrated. The object of his violent sexual fantasy has disappeared. Even when Jim and Sandy return from skiing, Dana Ireland is not there. Where did she go? On December 24th, 1991, the killer is returning home, driving his pickup truck eastbound on Kapohokai Drive. He sees a bicycle rider up ahead. He is surprised. It looks like Dana Ireland. He pulls into the left oncoming lane. He overtakes her. He sees that it is her. The object of his fantasy has reappeared. He pulls forward past Dana Ireland and stops his truck in the left oncoming lane. The killer is bewildered. He doesn't know what to do. He thought she was gone, but now she is right in front of him. He missed his chance once. He isn't going to miss it again. He looks in the rearview mirror. No one is coming. He looks ahead. No one is coming. He makes his decision. He floors the accelerator, his tires spinning on the cinder road. He aims his truck at Dana Ireland and slams into the rear of her bicycle. It is a brutal blitz attack from the rear. She never saw it coming. He continues eastbound after the collision, brutally dragging her underneath his truck. He then veers towards the north and ends up doing a U-turn. We see the point of impact, then the bike shift handle, Dana Ireland's wristwatch, a clump of her hair, and then her still tied left tennis shoe. The over 100-foot-long debris path evidences a brutal attack. Her wristwatch strap was broken. A clump of her hair was tore off, exposing her skull, and her left tennis shoe was ripped off her foot. The 10-year-old boy is alarmed, crying and shocked. The killer has to mollify him somehow. Maybe he says something like, "It was an accident. I didn't mean to hit her. The gas pedal got stuck. We have to help her. Take her to the hospital." The killer gets out of the truck and takes off his blue Jimmy Z t-shirt. He is feigning that he is going to help her. He wraps his shirt around her bleeding head wounds. He lifts Dana Ireland and puts her into the bed of the truck. After putting Dana into the bed of his pickup truck, the killer looks north up Ililani Road. Why? Because that's where he wants to go. For the first time, the shirtless man sees Eric and Karina watching him. He stares at them for about a minute. What did they see? He wants to go north on Ililani, but should he risk driving past them? He sees that Eric and Karina are not going anywhere. He hopes Eric and Karina didn't see anything, and he pretends he's there with a legitimate reason. The young boy presents himself. The driver realizes he must act. They drive off Mauka toward the mountain, westbound. As he heads westbound to avoid Eric and Karina, there are several options to go around them and get back on Ililani Road, northbound. He eventually gets back on Ililani northbound and tells his passenger, "I have to take you home. Take her to the hospital. It was an accident. Don't tell anyone or I'll get in trouble." He then drops the boy at his house, maybe their house, at neighbor A, B, C, or D. After dropping the boy at home, he decides he isn't going to the hospital. He heads toward an area that is familiar to him. There he's going to act out his angry and violent sexual fantasy. He drives to the fishing trail, crime scene 2. He takes Dana out of the truck, dumps her in the bushes, partially disrobes her, viciously bites her breast, finishes his sexual assault, and leaves her to die. Shortly after the killer drives off, Ida Smith finds Dana Ireland still alive. Ida Smith asks Dana Ireland who is responsible for her injuries. Dana tells Ida that the man who attacked her is either a friend or a friend of a friend. 23-year-old Dana Ireland died at the Hilo Hospital at 12:25 a.m. December 25, 1991. In order to describe who Judges for Justice believes killed Dana Ireland, we analyzed the evidence, made reasonable deductions, and considered the known characteristics of disorganized killers as identified by FBI experts. Is it exactly what happened? Probably not, but we believe it is close. Hindsight is always 20/20. Our goal is not to criticize the participants in this case, past or present, in any way. But the fact is, the time is now. There is a killer still out there walking the land. We implore the Hawaii Police Department and the Hawaii County Prosecuting Attorney to reopen the case and follow the evidence with new vigor and determination. We have the killer's DNA profile. With good detective work, we can begin to generate new suspects today by looking at the males living in or frequenting Jim and Sandy's neighborhood. Local government's primary duty is to keep the communities safe. It is the duty of the police to investigate crime. It is the prosecutor's duty to prosecute crime. Big Island law enforcement closed the Dana Ireland murder investigation in 2000. If you believe that Hawaii County law enforcement should reopen the investigation of Dana Ireland's murder, then please contact them. This ends episode 11. In episode 12, we'll look at the common patterns and elements in wrongful convictions. How Canada prosecutors say the leading cause of wrongful convictions is tunnel vision and its perverse byproduct of noble cause corruption.